complaints about action were justified?
That's actually a difficult question, because morally, at my age, I ought to say, yes, I think they were. It was disgraceful stuff. But I don't really think so. I don't think they were. It was just storytelling. What really pissed me off, actually, was one of the things they had a go at was Tom Tully's Look Out for Lefty strip. And they blew up, and it was either the Daily Mirror or the Sun, and I can't remember which. I think it was the Mirror. They blew up the panel where someone, it might be someone in the crowd, hurls a bottle or a can at either at Lefty or at one of Lefty's opponents as he's going in to shoot at the goal. His girlfriend.
At another family's heckling.
That's right, and that's right. Yes, you're right. But it does go on the pitch, and you can actually see.
On you, Angie,
yes, Angie, that's her name, and that was the thing that was blown.
Talking about some of the other characters involved in creating action, like Tom Tully, Jerry Finlay-Day, and Alan Hebden.
Yes, can I get into that by saying I used to think that, in fact, I used to enjoy thoroughly writing for Action and 2000 AD, but the one I really enjoyed was Battle Picture Weekly. It was run by a guy called Dave Hunt, who was a brilliant editor because he hated war stories, and he was a football fanatic, and you had to really pull all the stops out to get a story, a war story, that he would say, oh yeah, okay, go ahead with that. And you felt that you were really doing something. You actually felt quite on a high when you got something past Dave Hunt. And if he liked your work and he gave you, a series or something like that, I mean, that was just brilliant. And working for someone like Dave Hunt, who again was a real old pro, and he was although he was about my age, he was still, he'd started with IPC, or Fleetway Press, Amalgamated Press, when he was 16 as a sort of copy boy, as an office boy, and he'd worked his way up. And Pat got him the gig as editor of Battle, and because he recognised that Dave was a terrific editor who didn't like war stories. That was the thing about Dave. I mean, a lot of us used to write for all three. Alan Hebden, for instance, wrote for Battle. He created Major Easy, which is a brilliant story, and he also did a lot for 2000 AD, and he also did a bit for Action. He did. One of the trouble with Alan was he was. Are you listening, Alan? Wherever you are, he's a terrific writer, really very good writer, but he was a pothead of the first degree, and he wasn't. He'd do 3 scripts, and then poor old Jeff Kemp would be frantic. He couldn't get hold of Al. Where's Al? Al vanished. He'd gone. Where was he? Don't know. He'd gone off to Kathmandu or something. And they didn't have cell phones or anything in those days. And working with Alan was kind of worrying. You really had to. But when he got down to it, he was a brilliant writer. Jerry Finlay-Day was a superb writer. His scene descriptions were bilge. He was just dreadful. He did a lot of Jerry Finlay-Day. He was a brilliant storyteller. Fuck. Finlay-Day was another terrific writer. I mean, he was a good storyteller. I know what it is. It's coming up for 7 o'clock, and it's the shop is just closing. Jerry Finlay Day was another terrific writer. He was a brilliant storyteller, but as a writer, as a script writer, his scripts were, I mean, he used to tear your hair out because they were basically huge, long screeds in which Jerry would try to get in half the German army into one small frame. And he'd actually say things like, here's 500 SS elite coming into the left-hand side of the panel, 250 SS elite coming into the right-hand side, our hero in the middle, and the RAF coming out of the skies. It's like, God almighty, Jerry, come on, lighten up. And his dialogue sometimes had to be, really translated, because he had he had a very good education, but he was almost illiterate. But he was a brilliant storyteller. He knew how to tell a story. That was the thing. John Wagner is, what am I talking about? Certainly is a brilliant storyteller. But I remember he was one of the great grumps of the comics biz in many ways. I remember when he was doing Darky's Mob, and if anybody remembers Darky's Mob, I hope they do. It was actually reprinted fairly recently somewhere in Judge Dredd magazine. And the thing about Captain Darky, he wasn't a captain at all. He had a bald head, and John always had a flourishing thatch on his head, and he did this Darky's Mob for battle for Dave Hunt. And after a while, Dave Hunt said, "This is a great story, John, but I think we're going to knock it on the head, because we've reached, the final, and we don't want to go on." And John said, "No, must go on, must go on." And Dave said, no, I'm going to knock it on the head. And John was getting terribly grumpy. And Dave said, look, he said, if you come in with another instalment, I'll just rewrite it and put the end on it. And so he came up with the final instalment, and he rang up Dave and said, I'm coming in with the final instalment. And he came in and he'd shaved all his hair off as a kind of gesture to make Dave feel small. It didn't make Dave fell about. We were all falling about, and he just looked thunderous.
Do you think there was a bit of a sort of rock and roll atmosphere in there? You know what I mean? Sort of egos clashing and stuff like that.
There was certainly a lot of, yes, there was a lot of excess adrenaline and excess testosterone. You were to a certain extent trying to beat everybody else. Your stories were trying to be more violent than someone else's, or cleverer, or more political. I did try to get, it is perfectly true, for instance, not particularly in Kids Rule, I mean, they say it was politics. It wasn't really. I was trying to tell a good story, a rattling good yarn. With Hell's Highway, I did try to get politics in, because I got a lot of my own personal obsessions in about the CIA and the American government. And again, I then was, and indeed am now, enormously anti-American for many reasons which I don't need to go into now. But all of that I bunged into Hell's Highway, and nobody took it out. And it was terrific, because you thought, well, the kids who are reading this, they're probably going to say, oh, well, these secret American government people, they are a bunch of shits, aren't they? Which they are. They are, really. They truly are. And you tried to get something like that over. And I think other writers did at the same time. Alan Hebden's scripts were always very freewheeling, because he was a very freewheeling personality. And you read Alan's scripts. He was Major Easy in battle. That was Al. Yeah, he Major Easy sort of lounged around looking as though he was stoned to the nines. That was Al. was out to the T.
So a pothead James Coburn.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and that was Major Easy, and it was Al, and we were all. I remember Alan and I were absolutely on to Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which both of us thought was a ginormously brilliant book. Where are you, Al? Are you in Kathmandu? I hope you're not dead.
I suppose we can now go back to the final
A bit
you were getting,
dangerous.
and kind of feedback you were getting via the letters coming in, and the kind of excitement that the comic was, because it was very big. It was doing very well at the beginning.
Okay, ask me a prompting question.
When did you become aware of the nature of action, the fact that it was building a very loyal and surprisingly large fan base?
Well, what we got, what we were getting, and it surprised Jeff Kemp, who was, as I said, he was of the old style, semi-old style of editors, was we were getting these incredible letters coming in, really saying, well, this is terrific. Comics like Lion and Valiant and Thunder and Sun and Comet and all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. What we did, we got letters in, but we had to bribe the kids. So, say, you know, £5 for your joke. You'd send a joke in, and when you send your joke in, put your first 3 favourite stories. So therefore we had a vague idea of what was popular and what was not. With Action, we were getting love letters. We were getting letters from girls. We were getting letters saying, this is a terrific comic. We really like it. It's great. And they were sort of writing in the Action language, so that instead of saying you, it'd be ya. So, you know, all that sort of stuff. And the enthusiasm was huge. And whatever they say now about it, you know, however many people say it probably had a bad influence, it didn't, because it built up a real enthusiastic base of kids. We hadn't seen this before. We didn't get, in the old days, comics didn't get that kind of reaction. They didn't get letters from readers saying, don't stop it. What, you know, this is great. We love it. We love all the things like, oh, Milton Finesilver was Big Ed, and then and Pratt of the Week or Idiot of the Week or things like that. Shoals of letters saying so and so is our biggest Pratt. You know, show a picture of him, or show a picture of her. He's really boring, or you know, all this. And I think the editorial were quite surprised, staggered at the reaction that they got. And I don't think even you didn't even get that on Battle. You didn't get letters. Good comic, I think, as Battle was. Forget about its subject matter, but as a storytelling comic, Battle was brilliant. But you didn't get that kind of reader enthusiasm. You did get it with Action. You got it with 2000 AD, but that was later. And that started to become a kind of semi-adult view of things, a kind of understanding, nods and winks. But with Action, it was, we've never seen something like this before, and we really thank you for coming up with it, because it's just what we want.
Would it be fair to say that the from the readers encouraged you and the other writers to let the brakes off in many ways with the stories?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it has to be said that it was one of the things that we were given by Pat and Jeff. They did say, you know, let's make it as violent as possible, as you can, as you like. You know, if there's anything I came up with a story again, and it wasn't because of the violence, it was because, and Pat didn't like this one, I came up with a Dredger story where Dredger is trying to get into a guarded house, and there's dogs, vicious killer dogs, encircling the house so he can't get in. And his Dredger climbs over the wall, and one of the dogs goes for him and leaps at him. And the twist was, at the beginning, the opening twist, because you tried to get 2 or 3 twists into a 3-page Dredger, and the first twist was that instead of the dog biting Dredger bites the dog. And it was turned down, the idea was turned down. Can't have Dredger biting a dog. He can blow someone's fucking head off, but he cannot, bite a dog in the jugular, which is fair enough, I suppose. But we did, because of the enthusiasm of the reader response, because of that, you did feel that you could, what they wanted, we could give them what they wanted. And that's what we tried to do. It's got to be remembered that that Action was a climb-on comic. It climbed on the backs of various things in the media, like Dredger was Dirty Harry-ish, and other things like that.
Jaws.
Hook Jaw was Jaws, exactly.
Spinball
Was Rollerball, and all of these things we were swiping off the comics and other media, wiping off other media, films and things, and I have to say that was a perfectly legitimate thing in storytelling. All storytelling is, to a certain extent, taking something off bits of other stories that have gone before, and you meld them together into your own idea, your own particular plot. So there's nothing wrong with going on the back of things like films, popular TV shows. Tom Tully was really attracted by Steptoe and Son, and if you look at Tom Tully's script oeuvre, Tom, you had an oeuvre. Looked at Tom Tully's script oeuvre, you'll find a staggering amount of stories with a Steptoe and Son sequence or relationship in them. Last of the Harkers in Lion, Look Out for Lefty, Lefty's grandfather. The opening instalment, and this was put in, this wasn't the script writer, it was put in by Jeff Kemp. I know because he told me, because he liked the idea, because in fact he'd actually had experience of someone doing this. And Tom Tully had this. Jesus Christ. No, that's right. Okay, Tom Tully had this thing about, talking about swiping off or being influenced by other things in the media. Tom Tully had this thing about Steptoe and Son, and you will find in his oeuvre that so many of his stories had this grandfather-grandson relationship. In The Last of the Harkers, for instance, and for instance in Action, Look Out for Lefty. And in the very, absolutely wonderful, in the very first instalment of Look Out for Lefty, and it was inserted by, there was this grandfather-grandson relationship. Lefty was the grandson, and there's a terrible old grandfather who was a right old Albert Steptoe, dirty habits and everything. And Jeff Kemp inserted this sequence, first couple of frames of that. And what happened was, Lefty comes into his... Oh, Jesus Christ. Was that Lefty comes into his grandfather's house, and his grandfather's eating something, and Lefty looks and says, Granddad, what on earth are you eating? You're eating the dog food again. And just high comedy, but sort of in a absolutely grotty kind of way. And the readers loved it. They really loved it. They thought the idea of an old granddad having a bit of dog meat was just
It's really
tar.
Yeah, tar. With
Tar.
Tarred and feathered.
He's tarred and feathered.
I thought that was the most disturbing image in the entire comic. This old man covered in feathers running around.
And he had gapped, he had snaggled teeth as well, gaps in his, oh God. But the readers loved it. They really did love it. They all thought it was hilariously funny. And you know, it was their comic. That was the thing about Action. It was their comic, which far more than any other comic, they felt, the letters we were getting, the readers did feel it was theirs, that their parents, you know, didn't like it because it was violent, nasty, hopelessly, you know, politically incorrect, and all that. But it was theirs, and they loved it.
Thank you for your patience. And
That's all right.
Thanks for the food.
food.
I'm sorry it took you so long to get down. I mean,
The first thing happened was we were